So it seems we've got some brand new Warhammer 40k rules for the Adeptus Arbites. Let's take a look through the 3 datasheets for the Vigilants, Subductors and Exaction Squads and see what we've got. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking rules for the Imperial Police. It seems that Games Workshop have published some rules for the Adeptus Arbites units that they've released in that Kill Team Soul Shackle box. They are going to get some last 9th edition rules for people playing with them over the next few months. I think the Adeptus Arbites models really went down pretty nicely. They're basically the Imperial Police and Special Forces, and they go out hunting down Imperial lawbreakers of galactic importance, rogue psychers and planetary governors who aren't paying their tithes. I think the models are rather nice, a bit of a throwback to the previous Adeptus Arbites ones that came from the distant past. You get a squad of 10 of them, plus a rather creepy cyber mastiff to hunt down fleeing convicts, I guess. And then for most of the squad you have the option of either equipping them with shotguns or shield and maul. It seems that Games Workshop have given us not one but 3 different datasheets for these. One for the shotguns, one for the shields, and one for the specialist versions that you can build from Kill Team. The first 2 are troops, and the last one is elites. Let's take a look at the datasheets and see what they can do. First up, bringing the shotguns, we have the Vigilant Squad. The datasheets that they have are downloadable from Warhammer Community, and are fairly meaty affairs, quite a lot of war gear and a couple of special rules. The Vigilant Squads come in just squads of 10 models. They're a troops choice for 110 points for the Adeptus Arbites and Agents of the Imperium. In Arcs of Omen games, that's going to mean that they'd be included as basically a sort of allied choice that don't break your army restrictions or cost CP. Though I think again, as best I can tell, along with things like the Inquisition, they can't actually fill their own patrol detachments. They've got an Instruments of Repression rule, which means that if your arm is Battleforged, they only count as a compulsory troops slot if the whole detachment is an Adeptus Arbites one. The Arbites don't have an HQ though, which means that you can't field an entire Adeptus Arbites patrol. I feel like maybe it might have been a bit more sensible to swap that wording for Agents of the Imperium rather than Adeptus Arbites, but otherwise it looks like it's usually just going to be one squad alongside an Arcs of Omen list. In any case, for basically 11 points per model, you get a Guardsman sort of stats, Weapon Skill 4 and Ballistic Skill 4, Strength and Toughness 3, slight improvements towards the end of the datasheet though, with 2 attacks, Leadership 8 and a 4+ save. Not enormously impressive for 11 points, but they do get some decent enough firepower, I suppose. Going through their weapons, the primary armament that they have is the Arbites Combat Shotgun. That one's 2 shots at Strength 4, AP-1 and Damage 1, so not too bad anti-infantry stuff there. Plus the generic rule for the Adeptus Arbites appears to be one called Brutal Judgment. 6s to hit get to auto-wound the enemy within half range. That really does make the shotguns look quite a lot more threatening, though I feel like they might be the sort of unit that's not enormously easy to deliver into 9-inch range potentially. You wouldn't be able to do that at a strategic reserve, for example. Otherwise, each trooper also gets an Arbites Shock Pistol as well. That one gives you a single shot at Strength 4, AP-1 and Damage 1. I guess that's just something so they have something to fire in melee. And they also get frag and crack grenades if that makes sense as well. Then 2 of the units can take one of 4 different special weapons. Most of them are free, just the Executioner Shotgun costs a bit more. The choice of those is the Heavy Stubber, the Weber, the Arbites Grenade Launcher, and the Executioner Shotgun. Going through them in turn, the Heavy Stubber will give you a little bit more anti-infantry fire at 36-inch range there. Nothing too surprising about that one. The Weber's kind of interesting as it shares the profile with the Genestealer cults. It's the one where instead of rolling hit rolls, you roll once against the strength characteristic of the unit that you're targeting. If you succeed, then you get a mortal wound. Generally speaking though, it's not one of the most popular special weapons of the Genestealer cults. People often tend to take grenade launchers instead. Speaking of which, the Arbites Grenade Launcher is a bit different to the standard ones. You don't get the frag mode, but you just do get a single shot at Strength 6, AP-1 and Damage 3. That one seems reasonable and useful enough just for general purpose, I guess. Damage 3 means that if your opponent does fail a save on a vehicle or something, they're definitely going to feel it. Finally, perhaps the most exciting one is the Executioner Shotgun. This one's basically like a big sniper weapon, 24 inches and Assault 1, Strength 5, AP2 and Damage 2, and it's got that normal sniper rule where 6s to wound get you a mortal wound as well. I feel like it does look like the best out of any of these, it's just that extra 5 points as to whether or not that's worth it. Overall I would rate the weapons as somewhat balanced though. I feel like the Astartes Grenade Launcher seems to be fairly in line with what the squad wants to do anyway. They're going to be wanting to move about, so probably the Heavy Stubber isn't the best to be going on with. And otherwise I might be kind of tempted to upgrade to that Executioner Shotgun. That means that you've got 2 quality mid-strength shots in the unit. Then we've just got a couple of other options. For 10 points you can take that Cyber Mastiff. I feel like the little dog model is just a little bit too fun not to take, to be honest, if you're going to bother to bring one of these in the first place. He makes the squad's combat duties just a little bit better, though I must admit most of the squad isn't particularly outstanding. He moves 8 inches, hits on 3s in close combat with 3 attacks at strength 5, AP 1, and it's kind of otherwise a bit similar besides having a lower leadership. I suppose having a single model of just 8-inch movement might be kind of handy towards making charges. It means that you could string him out at the front and hopefully his extra movement could allow the entire squad to get in just that little bit easier. In general though, he's not going to turn the squad from being a bad unit in combat to a good one. Probably not worth it for raw points efficiency, but he is very fun. Then finally the Legion Sergeant, called a Proctor Vigilant, can take something called a Nuncio Aquila. This is basically the big loudhailer type thing on the floating Imperial Eagle. This one gives you the chance to debuff an enemy unit which is up close to you in the morale phase. You trigger it in your morale phase, so I guess that will be after your opponent's had a turn of acting, and then you roll 2d6 versus their leadership. If you roll greater, then they get -1 to hit for their entire next turn and yours. It's only for infantry, cavalry and bikers, so it's not going to apply to really big things like knights, and that 2d6 versus leadership is just a bit on the unlikely side. Even pretty low leadership things like leadership 7 orcs are still going to pass this check more often than not. Realistically, again, it's just not worth for the very slim chance for 10 whole points. Your squad might just get wiped out, and most of the time the enemy is going to pass that check anyway. Still though, again, it's a cool model, kind of fun and fluffy rules in my opinion, as opposed to being anything too powerful. Overall, the Vigilants just seem like a close quarters combat shotgun toting squad. You want to have them mauling enemy infantry. Probably makes sense to give them the best upgrades that would help them with that. They're not going to be worth anything if they're just sitting back holding an objective and not putting those shotguns to work. Moving on though, we also have 2 other variants of these Adeptus Arbites, and first up we've got the Subductor Squad. These guys are also troops and just a little bit more expensive than the Vigilants. They're 120 points for the 10 of those rather than 110. These guys lose the shotguns, but still have the shot pistol, so they still have a little bit of ranged firepower. Their main weapons, though, are the Shock Maul, which strikes at strength 5, AP -1 and damage 1, with 2 attacks per guy. Maybe not terrible for clearing infantry, but still I'd say not particularly exciting at 12 points per model. And then that shield gives them a trio of different defensive rules. It gives them a 3+ armor save, it gives them a 5+ invulnerable save, and finally, if the enemy declares a charge against them, they get a shield line rule that allows them to set to defend, giving them a +1 to hit. I'd say it's probably a bit more value to take the Cyber Mastiff in this, as that could help them line up a charge, have him ranging out the front to reduce the charge distance to get them engaged, and he is actually decently better than the standard trooper in melee as well. Overall, they've got okay toughness for the cost, though I'd still say that their melee damage is pretty weak. Unless they're fighting against light infantry, they're not going to be all that exciting. You are still only getting 2 attacks per guy, mostly hitting on 4s and damage 1. You don't get the variant special weapons in this unit as well, they just all take the shields and the shock mauls. You can still take that Nuncio Aquila if you want to. Finally, last and perhaps the funkiest of them, we have the Exaction Squad. This one is representing the different individual kill team specialists that the unit can bring, and rather than being a troop's choice and fixed unit strength, this one is an elite's choice, 13 points per model, and you can take 5 to 10 models in the unit. These guys again are armed with the Arbites combat shotgun, so basically they're upgraded Vigilants really. They're not really any better at shooting them, so I guess their damage efficiency is a bit worse than those guys, but it does look like they get an upgraded weapon skill on their datasheets, so they get to hit on 3s in close combat, though again still at strength 3 and AP dash for the majority. Really the extra value that this squad gets, that they pay the extra points for, is in their specialists. They get 2 of these specialists included for free, and then the option to buy the 3rd in for an extra 10 points. First up, and one of the free ones, is the Chirurgent, so he's basically the unit's little medic surgeon. He still gets the combat shotgun like the rest of them, but also gets a medic kit as well, which allows you to turn the first failed save of the turn to damage 0. It's quite a nice little defensive rule, that one. It guarantees that you save the life of 1 Arbites. It kind of puts their per point durability pretty much on par with the Vigilant Squad. It's going to bring more value if you get to use it more than once. Next up for the free upgrades, we have the Revelatum. He does actually make the unit's shooting a bit better. His ballistic skill is 2+, so he gets to fire his combat shotgun a lot more accurately than his peers, and he also gives the unit a Soul Guilt Scanner special rule. This one allows him to target one enemy unit, and the unit shooting gets to ignore cover against that target. Overall, definitely not a bad boost for AP-1 things, could certainly help them out against some slightly more armoured targets hiding in light cover. Finally, we've got the one that you can pay points for, called the unit's Castigator. This guy actually adds a bit of melee punch to the unit, though he'll basically cost you 10 points more, as he's equipped with an Excruciator Maul that costs you 10 points. He'll be striking with 4 attacks at weapon skill 3+, and those attacks are at least fairly high quality, with strength 5, AP 2 and damage 2. Should be enough to kill just about one Space Marine on average each time he fights. To be honest, I feel like he would have been a pretty nice upgrade if he was 5 points. I feel like 10 points is just probably a bit too much to justify with that, particularly as the rest of the unit aren't particularly excited to get into combat. He's basically the only decent melee specialist besides the Cyber Mastiff, who's only got a few damage 1 attacks anyway. Overall, I feel like these guys might have the best value out of the 3 units that we've got. Maybe field them in small squads of 7. You have to take the regular guys and then add in the Revelatum and the Chirurgent. That'll give you a squad that gets to ignore cover, has one better shotgun specialist hitting on a 2+, and gets the extra durability of having a shrug off against 1 failed save each turn. I guess building out to 10 models for the 2 special weapons though might not be the worst either. Overall though, as best I can tell, I think it's still a bit annoying that it doesn't look like they work in an Agents of the Imperium patrol. I'm not entirely sure why Games Workshop have left that rule in, saying that they can only fill mandatory slots in a full Arbites detachment, and yet they have no character to lead that detachment. I guess it'd be a rule that has some relevance in boarding actions, but it would just be quite nice if they made the Agents of the Imperium patrol detachment work for mainstream 40k. I guess if you're running them in mainline 40k, that would mean taking an auxiliary support of just the 1 unit, so basically somewhere between 5 and 10 extra guys to reinforce your Imperial army. I must admit though, maybe with a similar sort of feel to the Imperial Navy Breachers, I kind of feel like none of these are really strong in their own terms. They feel like more fun and fluffy units to add a bit of flavour and lore to your force, plus if you just really like the models and I think that they are nice. I kind of feel like, as with the other Agents of the Imperium, Games Workshop actually just don't want to make these guys particularly strong in the first place, as if they are super powerful, then it means that literally every Imperial army will probably be running a unit of them. And I feel like that would just feel a bit weird if suddenly every Space Marine and Imperial Guardsman needs the Imperial Police to help them out, when they're maybe not supposed to be frontline battlefield specialists all the time. I feel like having them as kind of niche choices that you probably don't run competitively is probably the best idea. It means that they've got rule support if you want to run them in fluffy lists, but they aren't going to be something that people are going to feel obligated to run if they don't want to. In any case, the reasons that I don't think that these are going to be particularly strong is they just don't really have particularly strong damage or tough defense, and on top of that, compared with the vast majority of other units in your army, you're just not going to have very many synergies. These guys don't have stratagems to support them, and they don't have any leaders or HQs to make their damage better. On top of that, none of them are really cheap enough to be something like a minimal investments action type unit, say like the Imperial Navy Voidsman at Arms, you could argue for that course. The cheapest one of these would be the Exaction Squad, which does have a few of its own merits, but that still starts at 65 points, so is significantly more than the Voidsmen. For the individual units, the Vigilators have kind of okay shotgun damage, but it really is quite tailored towards light infantry and not very general purpose. When you're short ranged and you don't really have a clear way to deliver yourself into shooting range, this means I think that they're just going to struggle quite a lot. I'd say the Subductors get there in terms of defense, but again in terms of damage output, they're just not very exciting. You don't really want to compare these guys to, say, Sisters of Battle, Celestian Sacrosants, who also have shields and mauls. Finally, the Exaction Squad I'd say is probably the single most interesting out of the 3, as you can take smaller units of them. For a smallish unit with a nice medic and ignores cover built in with a 2+ hitting shotgun, I feel like they're perhaps the most interesting if you don't need the unit to be troops, but still I'd say they're far from standouts. Let me know your thoughts though. What do you make of the Adeptus Arbites rules for Warhammer 40k? Would you be tempted to put any of these squads on the tabletop, either from a rules perspective or just to dole out the Imperial justice to unsuspecting citizens? If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, or I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. Hopefully I'll be looking at the 10th edition Agents of the Imperium and Allied rules later in the day. Finally, if you've been enjoying all the videos and updates on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you are finding these useful and you'd like to help support. Channel patrons do get a few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, an enormous thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.